Weekend Breakfast
on 702. Let's walk the talk.
Welcome back. Weekend Breakfast, almost time to say goodbye, but let's talk about something very, very important in this whole era of COVID-19. Jason O'Reilly, General Manager at Advanced Intellect Cyber Division, joining us now to talk about the importance of cybersecurity. Jason, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nicholas, and good morning to your listeners.
So, we know that since the advent of the internet some just over 2 decades ago, cybersecurity has been something that's been bandied about. But it's not only about being hacked and maybe your internet history and all the different sites that you wouldn't want your friends, family or foes to find out that you're visiting. It's a very real economic threat nowadays.
Absolutely, and I think it's more of a threat now in COVID age due to everybody being online and not necessarily being in the office behind some form of protection in their organizations.
We're seeing this every single year, that the amount of transactions, value-wise and indeed actual numbers of the transactions themselves, each and every year we're breaking the record for the amount that we're spending online, the amount of transactions that are taking place online. In the research that you've done in your line of work, what are you seeing from a global and also a local South African perspective?
Yeah, Nicholas, and I think that's a very good point. As everybody's been pushed into working from home and having access to the internet like never before, we're starting to see transactions almost quadruple. I think in South Africa alone, let's take something like Black Friday. They almost, even during the COVID stage, almost saw an extra, I think it was 1.8 billion rand spent this year. So again, we're starting to see the statistics change dramatically because of the fact that we're online. But in being online, we've got to understand with all the flourishing around spending, there are threat actors out there that are taking advantage of people just simply wanting to do some online shopping. And I think these are the kind of things that we're really starting to see change. Great example, a lot of people tend to think that, well, it's not going to happen to me, right? One of the things that we know, it doesn't need to happen to you. There was a great article and a great situation that happened during the COVID time, specifically with an organization called Experian. Now, for those that don't know Experian, whenever we go and apply for credit, it goes through Experian and we do credit checks. One of the most interesting things in that breach, and again, this is on your website, is almost 600,000 companies' data was exposed, which effectively helps, not only people but organizations understand is that you don't need to do anything. A third party can be breached, and that in fact will change the statistics altogether. But more importantly, your information will be available for those threat actors to utilize. And that's where the biggest risk comes in.
A lot of people think that a cyber scam nowadays is one of those 419 things where we receive the random SMS and say, congratulations, my uncle's cousin's auntie just came into 500,000 Rand. I just need your ID number to give you 100,000 of it. But it's far more sophisticated and really has caught a lot of people with their digital pants down, so to speak, in 2020.
Exactly. So, by the way, that person that you're referencing was Mr. Johnson, right?
Exactly.
I think one of the things that we're seeing is, remember this, it's the age-old battle plan is, we all know that cybercrime used to be a big finance problem, and organizations like finance and anybody in finance would put up these great big walls, and so they would, stop people from coming in. It's the age-old art of war scenario. However, in COVID times, and obviously as the internet is becoming proliferated, we're finding that more and more access to purchasing is a lot easier, right? So where organizations are really struggling, and specifically organizations that are not what we term as cyber savvy, where their users haven't been trained, where people are unaware. We have a look now. A great example is our banking system have just stopped the check system. So Standard Bank, and I know the other banks will follow, is that you can't use a check anymore, right? And, I used to know an old FD, he swore by checks. The challenge is everything is going online. So people are being forced into this mechanism of transaction. The challenge is is that the education isn't there. Now, I know our government is in the process of putting together what we term as a cyber readiness program to educate its citizens. We're very far behind, obviously some of the major countries in the world. But one of the most critical things is we're starting to see small businesses being a target because they don't have the same defenses. There are mechanisms, and again, we come from the world of acronyms. There's something called business email compromise, where just what you mentioned, it's the typical 419 email that comes in. However, the sophistication has changed. It's not asking for money. It's creating urgency. It's creating a mechanism for people, specifically like SARS, or when it's time for tax, when it's Christmas time, all of a sudden emails start ending up in your inbox. And what we see with small businesses is they're not spending money on IT, right? They're spending the basics. They're getting the basics right. They're making sure they communicate. They're making sure they can transact. So what we've seen is there's been a ginormous shift from your large enterprise customers and your financial customers now moving into the small to medium markets. And the biggest challenge there is the cyber savvy component, where fraud is happening to an alarming rate. If we probably get a call 3-4 times a week where people have effectively clicked on a link which appeared in their inbox, which then in fact gave the adversary or the threat actor their invoicing details, which in turn then caused a change, and their suppliers were then sent emails to make payments to different bank accounts. It's really a shame on what's happening. And the challenge is that the information isn't readily available for people to understand what to look out for.
And the biggest shame as well is that, your banks, we won't mention names, but they're all guilty of it. If you come to them with the sub story of, I got sent a link, it looked like you, banks don't take responsibility when you are the victim of these cyber criminals.
Well, and yes and no. So what we're seeing a lot from the banks at the moment is they're offering obviously insurance policies. So there are cyber insurance policies you can take. More importantly, some of the banks are really stepping up to this space. You'll see on all of their websites they've got disclaimers, which is great, and there is a really good level of education on those websites. The problem is it's like reading the underwriting on any policy that you're doing. How many of us really do it, right? We don't. So I think what we're seeing is there is definitely a shift in the financial sector to educate the user. The challenge is that it is still not happening quick enough, and it is very much up to the user. So when there is a situation of fraud, if you do have the money, that generally ends up in court with one of the financials. And you have to prove that ultimately you carried out a level of due diligence, that you didn't make the mistake and it was something the bank did. You've got to be very careful of that, because again, at the end of the day, if an email ends up in your inbox and you then go and click on it and then you willingly enter your details into it, there's only so much the bank can do. The other challenge is it takes really nothing to open a bank account today. So what we're finding is that these bank accounts are opened up tomorrow. They transact for 3 or 4 days, because remember, our adversaries are using the internet, and they're using mail. There's a statistics which says 94% of all threat attacks come through mail, right? Everything from our ransomware, our business email compromises, everything comes through mail. There is some social engineering that happens, but that's more of a targeted. But if we think about these organizations that we expect to protect us, there's really only a level that they can go. The onus is up to you, the organization, you the person. But let's be honest, not everybody has the cyber savvy. I often say to my mother, she's definitely, BC, right before computers, because of her capability of understanding the transaction. And that's what a lot of people don't, they miss. And unfortunately, the banks can't be held responsible if you willingly click on all of those links and go through the process. If they do have some form of insurance, yes, you do have some form of cover. If you can prove that it wasn't your fault, absolutely the banks can help. But it's up to you. It's really up to the organization. It's about bolstering your knowledge of how to transact. It's about understanding. And again, I want to give you a great example, not to go off on a tangent. Business email compromise. This is an email coming into an administrator's inbox and then making a payment. If there is a process of manual that is put into that payment, you can stop the transaction. If there isn't, you can't stop the transaction. So it all comes back down to the processes small businesses have when paying, their suppliers or their producers.
So, Jason, take a step back there and let's talk about the Gogo Dlaminis of this world, if you will, right? Someone that hasn't transacted online a hell of a lot, and 2020 has seen them needing to buy their groceries online or needing to pay accounts online. What are the absolute basics that you need to keep in mind when you are making a payment and either putting in just your account details or your credit card details?
Sure, and I'd like to say it's simple. I always and the amount of research that I do, there's always 5 things you can teach someone, right? This is the reality. We're South Africans. One of the things that we do, and Nicholas, I know you do it quite regularly with the company that you own, is you walk down Hillbrow and you're always looking over your shoulder, or you walk in the street. Doesn't matter where you are, you're looking over your shoulder. The same needs to be said. If you're talking to Gogo and you're talking to, your grand and you're teaching them, the most important thing is about being vigilant. It's about if something looks too good, then it is too good. If something looks bad and it gives you a bad feeling, it is bad. I can give you all the tips and the tricks. The challenge we have is that the threat actors are always looking for vulnerabilities which are beyond Gogo's capabilities, right? So if there's a piece of software on a laptop or on a phone, right, that software itself can be vulnerable, right, which ultimately Gogo doesn't necessarily know. So there are some challenges where we can really help Gogo and our grannies and those that are before computers is remaining vigilant. If it looks too good, if it doesn't seem right, if it's not something you know about, just use your human intuition more than using technology, because it is the human intuition that's going to help you through this. There are tips and tricks, and we make that available, and so do many organizations and so do the banks. But the most important thing is, you've got to think about if you've got your purse and you're going into ShopRite Checkers or you're going into Pick and Pay or Woolworths, you make sure you hold on to that purse as tight as possible so nobody can get their hands on it. That's exactly how we need to be thinking about the internet today. This is something that is fantastic. Anybody can get access to it, but you've got to hold on to it so tight and make sure that nobody gets that username and that password so that they can get access to it. So the best way to explain it to Gogo is you hold on to that username and password, you don't share it, and you make sure at the end of the day the only person that has got access to it is you. Because if anybody else gets access to it, and that could be out of mechanisms that are way beyond their capabilities, is they're going to be owned and they're going to lose money.
And also, the most obvious one is normally, if it sounds too good to be true, well, it's not true.
Absolutely. You must remember, one of the things that the adversaries do is exactly like the advertisers do in Christmas, at Easter, at all of these Black Fridays. I mean, everything is about urgency, right? At any time that something is urgent, I promise you've got to look at it 5 times. My wife likes to shop online, and there's this website called One Day Only, right? I've got a bunch of people I know, and they're always telling me about these specials that are on one day only, and you've got to buy, and you've got to buy now. Yeah, that's maybe a legitimate website, but you've got to look at the urgency. What happens is they use social engineering 101 tactics here. This is about how do I create the urgency? How do I get you to click? A great time is tax. Tax season is phishing season. For anybody that doesn't know what a phishing scam is, it's very simply getting you to click on a link which is sent to you by somebody you don't know, or it looks like somebody you do know, whether it's the banks, whether it's the South African Revenue Services. People work on social engineering. It is about offering you something. And listen, in these times of COVID, everybody wants money. Everybody needs money. There are people out there that are so desperate, and we know that. Please don't click on those links unless you know who it comes from, or ultimately just take care. Just be vigilant. That is what these guys are doing. And believe it or not, there's not somebody sitting going, "Hey, I hope that Nicholas Bauer clicks on my link." They send out these links via what we term as robot armies. They send it out to the internet. They can be sitting in Kazakhstan for all you know, and they just put together this malware or this code, and they send it out to the internet everywhere all over the world. And if for some reason you click on that, you're in trouble.
Well, we could continue talking about this for an age, I'm sure, but where can we find out more about the work that you do and the work that Advanced Intellect does?
Yeah, absolutely. We're available, like anybody on the internet, at advanced.tech. Again, we've got a bunch of experts. We focus on helping organizations and helping people deal with some of the repercussions that have happened, either post or after. But we're readily available to have conversations and give people guidance in the right direction.
Jason O'Reilly, General Manager at Advanced Intellect Cyber Division.